Some choices arrive without warning, wrapped in darkness and blood. Call Brennan had survived 8 months alone on her homestead, convinced the worst of her isolation had passed. She was wrong when she found him collapsed against her barn door that October night. She had no way of knowing that helping him would lead to the most impossible request anyone had ever made of her, or that 3 words spoken weeks later would force her to choose between the safety of solitude and something far more dangerous than she'd ever imagined. The lamp oil was running low again. Calla pressed her palm against the cool glass, watching the flames sputter inside the kitchen window. Beyond the weak circle of light, her land stretched into darkness. 40 acres of stubborn earth that fought her every single day. Her hands ached from hauling water. Her back screamed from lifting feed sacks alone, and the fence on the eastern border had 3 breaks she couldn't fix without help she'd never asked for. She was 26 and felt 50. The wooden floor creaked as she moved toward the wash basin, her reflection catching in the darkened window. Thin, too thin, blonde hair, pulled back so tight it made her temples throb. Why had she stopped seeing herself as anything but tired? The sound came just as she reached for the basin. A thud, heavy, something hitting wood. Calla froze, her breath catching in her throat. Out here, sound meant danger. Animals, drifters, men who thought a woman alone was an invitation. Another thud, then silence so completed, pressed against her ears. She grabbed the rifle from above the door, her hand steadier than her heartbeat. 8 months of this. 8 months of every sound being a threat, every shadow a reason to sleep. With one eye open, she eased the door open, the hinges screaming in protest. The night air hit her face cool and sharp. She raised the rifle, scanning the yard. Nothing moved. The barn sat 30 yards away, a black shape against blacker sky. Then she saw him, a man, slumped against the barn door, his body twisted at an angle that looked wrong. Even from here, she could see the dark, stains spreading across his chest. Blood. Calla's first instinct was to run back. Inside, bar the door, pretend she'd seen nothing. But something stopped her. Maybe it was the way his head hung forward, defeated. Maybe it was the absolute stillness of him. Maybe it was because in 8 months, she'd become the kind of person who knew what dying alone looked like. She moved forward, rifle raised, each step deliberate. As she got closer, details emerged from the darkness. Tall, powerfully built even, in collapse. Long black hair falling across his face. Clothing she recognized, not from any settlement, but from the Apache who sometimes passed through the territory. Her heart hammered. Apache, here on her land. She stopped 10 feet away. If you can hear me, don't move. No. Response. She edged closer. Close enough now to see the wound. A bullet had torn through his shoulder, the blood still wet, still flowing. Close enough to see his chest rise and fall in shallow, labor breaths. He was dying. Calla stood there, rifle aimed at a dying man, and faced the first real choice she'd had in months. Leave him here and watch another person disappear from the world, or do something that could destroy the fragile safety she'd built. His eyes opened, dark eyes that locked onto hers, with an intensity that made her step back. He didn't speak, didn't plead, just looked at her like he was measuring something invisible. Then his hand moved just slightly away from his body, not reaching for a weapon, not threatening, surrendering. The gesture broke something in her. Calla lowered the rifle. Half an inch, her mind screaming at her to stop, to think, to be smart about this. But her voice came out anyway, barely above a whisper. Can you walk? His jaw tightened. A nod almost imperceptible. Then get inside before someone sees you. She had no idea that those 6 words would change everything. That the man bleeding on her land would soon ask her for something far more impossible than shelter. Something that would force her to confront every fear, every wall, every safe choice she'd ever made. But that revelation was still 2 weeks away. Right now, all she knew was the weight of another person's life in her hands and the terrible certainty that nothing would ever be the same. He was heavier than he looked, Calla wedged, her shoulder under his arm, her legs trembling as she took his weight, his skin burned with fever through his clothing, and up close, the metallic smell of blood mixed with something else. Smoke and leather and open sky. They made it to the door in agonizing increments. Each step sent a grunt of pain through him that he tried to swallow. She felt it anyway, felt the tremor of his body fighting to stay upright. Inside, she kicked the door shut and guided him to the chair near the fireplace. He collapsed into it, his head falling back, chest heaving. In the lamplight, she could finally see him clearly. He was younger than she'd thought, maybe 30. His face was angular, striking in a way that made her look away. The wound was worse in the light. Torn flesh and splintered bone visible. Through the blood, Calla forced herself to breathe. She'd patched up animals. This was just bigger, just human. She gathered cloth strips, whiskey, needle, and thread. Her hand shook as she approached him. He watched her with those dark eyes, unblinking as she began to clean the wound. The whiskey made him flinch, the only sign of pain he allowed. "This will hurt," she whispered, threading the needle. "Everything hurts." His voice was rough, accented the first words he'd spoken. "This is nothing." She began to stitch, her fingers clumsy at first, then steadier. He didn't make a sound, didn't move, just kept breathing slow and measured like he was somewhere else entirely. When she finished, she wrapped his shoulder tight and stepped back. "You need rest and water." He nodded once. "Why did you help me?" The question hung in the air between them. Calla didn't have an answer that made sense. "Because I could." Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but close. "You were alone here." It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. "Yes, that is dangerous. So is this." She gestured at him, at the blood on her floor, at the choice she'd already made. "If anyone finds you here, they will not find me." His certainty was absolute. "I will leave when I can walk without falling." But 3 days later, he was still there. The fever broke on the second night. Calla woke to find him standing at her window, silhouetted against the pre-dawn gray. His shoulder was bandaged, his stance stronger. "You should be resting," she said from the doorway. "Il fast." He turned to face her. "The fence on your eastern border is broken. I know. There are signs of wolves. They will come for your livestock. I know that too." He studied her, and she felt herself shrinking under the weight of it. "You cannot fix it alone. I've managed so far." Managed is not the same as survived. He moved toward the door. "I will fix your fence. You can barely lift your arm. I will fix your fence," he repeated, and there was something in his voice that silenced her protest. Not command exactly, more like statement of fact. By midday, he was working. Calla watched from the house, conflicted. She should tell him to stop, to rest, to not make himself at home on her land. But she couldn't because, for the first time in 8 months, she wasn't carrying everything alone. He worked shirtless in the afternoon heat, his wounded shoulder clearly visible, but not slowing him. She brought him water, keeping her eyes carefully on the ground as she approached. "Drink." His fingers brushed hers as he took the cup. The contact lasted half a second too. Long enough for her to feel the calluses on his palm, long enough for her breath to catch. He drank, his eyes never leaving her face. "What happened to your husband?" The question was a blade. "Fever took him. Last winter. You buried him alone." "Yes." Something passed across his face. Understanding maybe. Or recognition of a particular kind of pain. That is a heavy thing to carry. She wanted to look away, but couldn't. "What happened to your people?" His jaw tightened. For a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then quietly they are gone. The words held more weight than 3 syllables should carry. Gone didn't mean left. It meant something far worse. She knew better than to push. That night, he slept in the barn. Call lay awake in her bed, staring at the ceiling, acutely aware of his presence 30 yards away. A stranger, an Apache, warrior who'd appeared bleeding on her land and who now knew where she kept her rifle. She should be terrified. Instead, she felt something she hadn't felt in 8 months. Not quite safety, but close. What she didn't know was that safety was the wrong thing to feel. That in 9 days, he would ask her something that would shatter every assumption she'd built, and that her answer would determine not just her future, but his entire reason for surviving. By the 5th day, Nakoa had fixed the fence, reinforced the barn door, and repaired the water pump that had defeated her for 3 months. Kala watched him work from increasingly closer distances, finding excuses to be nearby, bringing water, checking his shoulder, asking unnecessary questions. She told herself it was practical. He was helping. She owed him courtesy. She was lying to herself. The moment came on the 6th evening. Kala was in the barn, struggling with a feed sack that had torn, grain spilling across the floor in a cascade. She couldn't stop. Her hands grabbed uselessly at the burlap, frustration burning behind her eyes. Then he was there, lifting the sack like it weighed nothing, setting it upright with one smooth motion. He stood close, too close, the heat of him tangible in the cooling air. You try to do everything, he said quietly. I have to. No. His hand reached out, and for a breathless moment, she thought he would touch her face. Instead, he picked a piece of straw from her hair, his fingers hovering near her temple. You choose to. The distinction felt important in a way she couldn't articulate. She looked up at him, at the sharp lines of his face in the fading light, at the way his eyes held hers without wavering. I don't know how to ask for help, she admitted, the words scraping out. You did not ask. I offered. His voice dropped lower. There is a difference. The air between them felt charged. Kala's heart hammered so loud she was certain he could hear it. She should step back, create distance. Remember that this was temporary, that he would leave, that this was madness. She didn't move, neither did he. The moment stretched, pulled taut like wire, and then shattered at the sound of hoof beatots. Nakoa's entire body shifted, his hand dropping to where a weapon should be. Kala's stomach dropped. Go now. The back of the barn. He hesitated, only a second before disappearing into shadow. Kala emerged from the barn just as 2 riders approached. She recognized them immediately. Garrett Mills and his son Thomas, neighbors from 5 miles east who'd made it clear they were watching her land with interest. Evening, Kala. Garrett's smile didn't reach his eyes as he dismounted. Saw smoke from your chimney all week. Thought we'd check on you. I'm Fine, Garrett. Thank you for the concern. Thomas was already scanning the yard, his gaze lingering on the repaired fence. That's some fine work on that Easter border. Didn't know you had those kind of skills. Her throat tightened. I manage. Funny thing. Garrett stepped closer, his voice dropping. Old Buck down at the trading post mentioned seeing an Apache near this territory a few days back. Wounded, he said. You see anything like that? The lie came easier than it should have. No, nothing. Because if you did, you'd tell us, right? Thomas moved to flank her other side. Can't be too careful. Apache in these parts usually means trouble. I haven't seen anyone. She met Garrett's eyes, forcing her voice steady. And I'd appreciate it if you respected my land. I didn't invite you here. Garrett's expression hardened. Just being neighborly. Callow woman alone. Needs looking after. His gaze drifted to the barn. Mind if we take a quick look around? Put our minds at ease. Yes, I mind. She didn't move. You're not welcome in my barn or anywhere else on my property. The silence stretched. Dangerous and thin. Thomas's hand drifted toward his belt. Garrett's jaw worked like he was chewing on something bitter. Finally, Garrett stepped back. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Your husband's been dead 8 months. You can't keep this place running forever. Watch me. They mounted their horses, but Garrett paused before turning. We'll be checking in regular, like to make sure you're safe whether you want us to or not. The threat was clear. They rode off, leaving Kala standing in her yard with her heart in her throat. Nakoa emerged from the barn, only after the hoof beats faded completely. His face was unreadable, but his body language spoke volumes. Tension, readiness, danger. They will come back, he said. I know they want your land. I know that too. She turned to face him. And if they find you here, they'll use it as an excuse to take it, to say I'm helping enemies, that I'm unfit, that I need their protection. He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that made her chest tighten. Then I should leave. The words hit her like a physical blow. She opened her mouth to agree, to say yes, to choose the smart thing. Not yet, she heard herself say instead. Just not yet. Something flickered across his face. Relief, maybe, or recognition of what she'd just admitted without saying it. He nodded. Once. Then we need to talk about why I came here, about what I need. Her stomach twisted. What do you mean? Tomorrow. His eyes held hers, and she saw something in them that terrified her more than Garrett's threats. Vulnerability, need, purpose. Tomorrow, I will tell you the truth, and you will understand why I cannot simply leave. He walked back to the barn, leaving her alone in the gathering darkness with a question she wasn't sure she wanted answered. Kala didn't sleep. She lay in bed, listening to the night sounds, her mind circling the same question over and over. What would he possibly need that? Required staying? That required this conversation he'd promised. Dawn came too fast and too slow. She found him by the water pump, washing his face in the cold morning air. He straightened when he heard her approach, water dripping from his jaw. His shoulder was healing cleanly, the bandage she'd changed yesterday showing no fresh blood. He would be strong enough to travel soon. The thought created a hollow feeling in her chest she didn't want to examine. You said we needed to talk, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Nikoa dried his face slowly, like he was buying time. When he finally looked at her, something in his expression made her breath catch. Not fear, not anger, something raw, more desperate. Come. He gestured toward the small grove of trees behind the barn. Not here, where we cannot be seen. Her heart hammered as she followed him. The morning sun filtered through the branches, creating patterns of light and shadow across the ground. He stopped in the center, turning to face her. What I'm about to tell you, he began, his voice rough. You must hear all of it before you speak, before you judge. All right. He was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant. When he spoke again, the words came slowly, like each one cost him something. 6 months ago, there were 43 of us. My family, my people. We had moved away from the main territories, try to find peace in isolation. His jaw tightened. The soldiers found us. Anyway, they said we were trespassing. They said we were a threat. Kala's stomach turned. I was hunting when it happened. I heard the gunfire from 3 miles away. By the time I reached our camp, he stopped, his hands curling into fists. There was no one left to save. Not my mother, not my father, not my sister or her children, not the elders, not the warriors, not even the dogs. The weight of those words settled over her like ash. I am the last, he continued, his voice breaking on the final word. The last of my bloodline, the last who carries our stories, our language, the names of our ancestors. When I die, everything we were dies with me. Gala wanted to speak, to offer something, but her throat had closed completely. Nakoa turned to face her fully, and the intensity in his eyes pinned her in place. I did not come to your land by accident. I have been watching you for days before I approached. I saw you working alone. I saw your strength. I saw you stopped, searching for words. I saw someone who understands what it means to survive when survival feels impossible. Why are you telling me this? His next words came out barely above a whisper. Because I need something from you. Something I have no right to ask. But I must ask anyway, because the alternative is letting my entire people disappear as if we never existed. Fear spiked through her. What do you need? He held her gaze, and she saw him gathering courage for something that terrified him, as much as it would terrify her. I want a child from you. The words hit her like a physical blow. Kala stumbled back a step, her mind refusing to process what she'd just heard. What a child. His voice was steady now, committed to the path he'd chosen. My blood, my heritage, someone to carry forward what remains. I'm asking you to help me preserve what little is left of my people. You're asking me to. She couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't make the words real. I'm asking you to give me a child. 2. Let me leave something behind when I go. He took a step toward her, and she took another step back. I would ask nothing else. I would make no demands on you. The child would be yours to raise. I only ask that you tell them where they came from, who their father was, what people flowed through their veins. Kala's heart was racing so fast she felt dizzy. This is insane. You can't ask someone. I know. The rawness in his voice stopped her. I know what I'm asking. I know it is impossible, but I am the last. And if I die without leaving something behind, it is as if 43 people never lived at all, as if generations never existed, as if our entire way of life meant nothing. Why me? The question came out strangled. Because you are alone. Because you understand loss. Because he stopped, his voice dropping. Because when I look at you, I see someone strong enough to carry this weight. Someone who would honor what I'm asking, not just use it. The words should have been flattering. Instead, they felt like a trap closing around her. You're asking me to have a child with a stranger. Her voice shook to create a life with someone I've known for 6 days. So I'm asking you to help me survive in the only way that matters. His eyes held, hers desperate and determined. My body will die. That is certain. But if there is a child, even one carrying my blood forward, then something survives. Some small piece of who we were continues. Kala's mind reeled. This was madness. This was impossible. This was no. The word burst out of her. No. This is you. Need to leave right now, Kala. I said no. Her voice cracked. I helped you. Because you were dying, not because not so you could ask me for something like this. You need to go now. Pain flashed across his face, but he nodded slowly. I understand. I will leave at dawn. He walked past her, back toward the barn, leaving her alone in the grove with her heart hammering in her mind, screaming. What terrified her most wasn't that he'd asked. It was that some small traitorous part of her was already wondering what she would say if she was brave enough to consider it. Kala didn't go back to the house. She stood in the grove for what felt like hours, staring at nothing. Her mind a war zone of thoughts she couldn't control. A child. He wanted a child. The audacity of it should have made her furious. Instead, it made her something worse. Confused. Because underneath the shock, underneath the immediate rejection, there was a question she couldn't silence. Why not? She crushed the thought as soon as it formed. Because it was insane. Because you didn't create life with strangers. Because this wasn't how the world worked. Because every reason she could think of said no. But a smaller voice whispered back, what life are you protecting by saying no? The empty one you've been living? The one where you go weeks without speaking to another soul? The one where you're so lonely you've started talking to the horses like they might answer. She pressed her palms against her eyes, trying to force the thoughts away. When she finally returned to the house, the sun was high and hot. Nakoa was in the barn, gathering his few possessions. She watched him from the window, her chest tight. He was leaving, like she'd asked, like she demanded. So why did it feel like she was losing something she hadn't known she needed? That night, Calla sat at her table with a piece of paper and a pencil, trying to write down all the reasons this was. Impossible. The list grew quickly. He's a stranger. This is madness. What would people say? I'd be ruined. It goes against everything. I could never explain this. I don't know him. This isn't how families are built. She stared at the list, waiting for it to bring clarity. Instead, another thought crept in, unbidden and unwelcome. What if he's right? What if this is the only way something survives? She flipped the paper over and started a new list. This one came slower. I am alone. I will likely always be alone. No man will court a poor widow. I wanted children once. I understand what it means to be the last of something. He asked. He didn't demand. He would leave. The child will be mine. Her hand trembled as she wrote the final line. Maybe loneliness makes people consider impossible things. She crumpled both papers and threw them in the fireplace, watching them burn. He found her there an hour later, staring into the flames. She heard him enter, but didn't turn. I will leave before dawn, he said quietly. You will not have to. See me go. That's not. She stopped, unsure what she meant to say. That wasn't kind. That wasn't necessary. That wasn't what she wanted. Nakoa moved closer, and she felt him beside her. Both of them watching the fire. I should not have asked, he said. It was unfair. You owe me nothing. You were desperate. Yes, but that does not make it right. He was quiet for a moment. When I watched my people die, I made a promise to their memory that I would not let us disappear completely, that I would find a way to continue what they began. His voice cracked, but I did not consider what that promise might cost someone else. Calla turned to look at him. In the firelight, his face was all sharp angles and shadow. If you had another option, would you take it? There is no other option. Apache women. He stopped, his jaw working. There are none left in this territory. Those who survived were taken to reservations hundreds of miles away. I have searched. I have traveled. You are not a replacement for what I should have had. You are the only possibility that remains. The honesty of it was brutal. She appreciated that he didn't dress it up, didn't pretend this was about her specifically. It was about survival, about legacy, about the mathematics of extinction. And if I said, yes, the words came out before she could stop them. If I was insane enough to consider this, what would that look like? His eyes widened slightly, hope flashing across his face before he controlled it. I would stay until you carried the child. Then I would go. I would not burden you with my presence. The child would be yours alone to raise. But you wanted to tell them, yes, who their father was, where his people came from, the language. If I could teach you enough before I left, the stories. His voice softened. I would want them to know they came from people who loved this land, who survived impossible things, who did not surrender, even when surrender would have been easier. That's not a small ask. No, it is everything. They stood in silence, the fire crackling between them. Calla felt herself standing at a crossroads she'd never imagined existing. Every practical part of her screamed to send him away, to forget this conversation ever happened, to go back to the safe, lonely life she'd built. But there was another part, smaller, quieter. The part that had helped a dying stranger. The part that had felt something shift when his fingers brushed hers. The part that wondered if maybe, just maybe, creating life was less insane than living half alive. I need time, she heard herself say, to think, to process what you're asking. How much time? I don't know. She looked at him, at the hope and fear wearing in his expression. But don't leave at dawn. Stay. One more day. Let me eat. Let me think. He nodded slowly. One more day. After he left, Calla returned to staring at the fire, her mind spinning with impossible calculations. How did you weigh your own fear against someone else's extinction? How did you measure one life against the eraser of an entire people? How did you Choose between safety and something that terrified you more than anything you'd ever considered. She didn't have answers, but she had one more day to find them. What she didn't know was that tomorrow Garrett Mills would return with 5 men and a decision that would force her hand in ways she never anticipated. The horses sensed them first. Calla was drawing water from the well when their heads lifted, ears pricked toward the eastern road. Her stomach dropped before she even heard the hoof beats. 6 riders, not 2. Garrett Mills led them, his face set with grim purpose. Behind him rode Thomas, 3 men from town she recognized, and a stranger wearing a territorial marshal's badge. Nakoa appeared at her elbow, so quickly she startled. "Go inside," he said quietly. "No." She stepped forward as the riders approached. "This is my land. I'll handle this." Garrett dismounted slowly, his eyes moving between her and Nakoa. "See, Calla, this is exactly what we were worried about. Found yourself some. Apache company after all. This is my property, Garrett. I can host whoever I choose." The marshal urged his horse forward. He was older, weathered, with eyes that had seen too much. Marshal Briggs. We've had reports of a fugitive Apache in this territory. Wounded, dangerous." "He's not dangerous. You're harboring him." Thomas spat against your own people. "My own people didn't show up when I needed help. Bury my husband." Her voice went cold. "My own people didn't offer assistance when I couldn't fix my fences or repair my barn. This man did. In 6 days, he's done more for me than any of you did in 8 months. Garrett's expression darkened. "You don't know what you're saying. You're being manipulated. Used. I'm being treated with more respect than I ever got from you." The marshal raised his hand, silencing the argument, his gaze fixed on Nakoa. "You have a name, Nakoa. Where's your tribe, Nakoa?" The silence stretched. Calla watched Nakoa's jaw tighten. Watched him make a decision. Dead. All of them. The word hung in the air like smoke. Even Garrett seemed taken aback. The marshal's expression didn't change. "That's true. 6 months ago, soldiers said we were trespassing." Nakoa's voice was flat, empty of emotion. "I was the only one hunting when they came. The only one who wasn't there to die." One of the townsmen shifted uncomfortably. Another looked away. Even Thomas seemed uncertain. The marshal studied Nakoa for a long moment. "You the one who's been reported stealing from homesteads?" "No." "You have any proof of that?" Calla stepped forward. "I'm his proof. He's been here for 6 days. Nothing's been stolen. He's repaired my property, not damaged it. If you're looking for a criminal, you're looking at the wrong man." "Calla, you don't understand what you're protecting," Garrett said, his tone shifting to something meant to sound reasonable. "Even if he hasn't done anything yet, you can't trust him. You're a woman alone." He could what?" Her voice cut like glass. "Help me survive. Treat me like I have value. Actually listen when I speak." "Yes, Garrett." "How terrible." The marshal's eyes narrowed slightly, and Calla realized with a cold shock what he was seeing. What they were all seeing. The way she stood close to Nakoa. The way she defended him without hesitation. The way this looked. "Ma'am," Marshall said carefully, "are you under duress? Is this man forcing you to protect him?" "No, because if he is, you can tell us. We'll handle it." I said, "No." She met his eyes directly. "I'm protecting him because I choose to. Because he deserves protection, and because what you're really here for isn't justice. It's an excuse to take what isn't yours." Garrett's mask slipped completely. "You're going to regret this, harboring an Apache, choosing him over your own kind. People will talk, Calla. They'll say things. They'll wonder what exactly has been happening here." The threat was clear, the insinuation deliberate. "Let them wonder." Her voice didn't shake. "I know the truth. That's enough." The marshal regarded her for another long moment, then turned his horse. "We'll be going, but understand this, ma'am. You're making a choice here, and choices have consequences. I'm aware they rode off. But Garrett lingered, his eyes hot with anger and something uglier. This isn't over. Yes, Nakoa said quietly, speaking, for the first time since his confession. It is. Touch her, threaten her, come near this property again, and I will make certain it is the last thing you do. The menace in his voice was absolute. Garrett paused slightly, then spurred his horse hard, riding after the others. When they were gone, Kala's legs nearly gave out. She stumbled and Nakoa caught her, his hand steady on her arms. You should not have done that, he said. They will destroy you for this. They would have destroyed me anyway. She looked up at him, something crystallizing in her chest. Garrett wants my land. He's wanted it since my husband died. This was always going to be the fight. You just gave me a reason to stop being afraid of it. Kala, I need to tell you something. The words came fast before courage left her. Last night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what you asked about Wyatt. Terrified me so much. His hands tightened slightly on her arms. And it terrified me because saying yes means admitting how alone I am, how badly I want something to care for, how tired I am of surviving instead of living. Her voice cracked. You're asking me to create life with you. And the terrifying part isn't that I barely know you. It's that I want to say yes. The world seemed to stop. Nakoa stared at her like she'd just spoken in a language he didn't expect to hear. You want to say yes? He repeated slowly. I don't know if I'm brave enough. I don't know if I can actually do this, but I know that if you leave tomorrow, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering what I was too afraid to choose. She met his eyes. So, I'm asking you, if I said yes, would you stay? Would you help me build something that terrifies me? Would you promise that what we create together matters? Yes. The word was immediate, fierce to all of it. Yes. Her breath caught. Then, stay. Not just one more day. Stay until we know. And then, well, figure out what comes after. Nakoa pulled her closer, his forehead dropping to touch hers. She felt the tremor in his hands, felt the weight of what she'd just agreed to settling over both of them. You are the bravest person I have ever met, he whispered. Or the most foolish. No, he pulled back just enough to look at her. Brave, and I will honor this. I swear it. Something had shifted between them. Something irrevocable. That night, they sat by the fire. The space between them charged with unspoken awareness. Kala's hands shook as she poured coffee, the cup rattling against the saucer. You're afraid, Nakoa observed quietly. Yes. Of me? She considered the question honestly. No. Of what this means. Of choosing something I can't undo. He set his cup down, his dark eyes reflecting. Firelight. We don't have to do anything tonight or tomorrow. This is your choice, your timing. I will not pressure you. The gentleness undid something in her. How do you do that? Do what? Make something impossible feel possible? A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Because impossible is the only thing I know how to survive. They sat in comfortable silence until Kala found her. Courage. Tell me about them. Your people. I should know what I'm helping preserve. His expression shifted. Pain and something like gratitude mingling together. He began to speak, his voice low and rhythmic, painting pictures of a life she'd never known. He told her about his mother, who could identify 100 different plants by touch alone. His father, who carved stories in a leather so detailed you could read them like books. His sister, who laughed like water over stones and could gentle the wildest horse with a single touch. Kala listened, watching the way his hands moved as he spoke, the way his whole body engaged with the memory. What was your name in your language? She asked, softly. Nakoa is my name. It means warrior. What would you call a child if there's one? He was quiet for a moment. That would be your choice. But, in my tradition, names are earned through living. We are given one name at birth and another when we prove who we are. Tell me the birth name you would choose. For a boy, Ashki, it means boy, but also promise. For girl, Nina, it means strong. She repeated the name, softly, feeling them shape her mouth. Teach me more. I should know the language. If I'm going to tell a child about their father, I should be able to tell them in his words. They spent the next 2 hours like that. Nakoa teaching. Her phrases. Kala's pronunciation clumsy, but determined. He corrected her gently, his patience infinite. When his hand covered hers to adjust how she shaped a word, neither of them pulled away. You learn quickly, he said, his thumb tracing the back of her hand. I motivated. The air between them thickened. Kala's heart hammered as he lifted her hand, pressing his palm flat against hers. His hand dwarfed hers, calloused and strong and warm. You can still change your mind, he said quietly. At any moment, even now, I will honor whatever you decide. She looked at their joined hands, at the physical proof of how different they were, different sizes, different colors, different everything. And yet somehow it felt right in a way nothing had felt right in so long. I'm not changing my mind. She lifted her eyes to his. I'm terrified, but I'm not changing my mind. He stood slowly drawing her up with him. In the firelight, his face was all angles and shadow, devastating and gentle at once. His free hand lifted to her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone with reverence. You're giving me something I thought I'd lost. Forever, he whispered. Hope you gave it to me first. The kiss when it came was soft, tentative, a question and an answer all at once. Kala's hands found his shoulders, feeling the strength there, the heat of his skin through the thin fabric. His arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her close, and she felt safe in a way that had nothing to do with protection and everything to do with being seen. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against hers. Are you certain? His voice was rough. Yes. Then come with me. He led her to the bedroom, every movement careful, giving her space to reconsider. At the threshold, he stopped, waiting for her to make the final choice. Kala stepped through, her hand still clasped in his, and closed the door behind them. What happened next was theirs alone, gentle and fierce by turns, awkward and perfect, scary and right all at once. He whispered her name like a prayer. She traced the scars on his back with trembling fingers. They created something together in the darkness, something that mattered more than either of them could articulate. When dawn came, Kala woke wrapped in his arms, her head on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. His fingers traced patterns on her shoulder, mindless and soothing. No regrets, he asked softly. She considered the question seriously, thought about what she'd done, what it meant, what people would say if they knew what she'd risked. No regrets. His arms tightened around her. Thank you. Don't thank me. Yet. We don't know if, even if there is no child, he interrupted gently. You gave me something I thought was gone forever. A reason to believe the world can still hold good things. She lifted her head to look at him. You gave me the same thing. They lay there as the sun climbed higher, neither wanting to break the moment. But eventually, reality crept back in. Garrett will come back. Nakoa said, with more men, more pressure. You will not let this go. I know you will face consequences for choosing me, for protecting me. I know that too. She sat up, pulling the sheet around her, but I'm done being afraid. I'm done letting other people dictate my life. For the first time in 8 months, I feel like I'm choosing something instead of just surviving. He pulled her back down, kissing her forehead, and we face it together. However long I can stay, we face it together. She nodded against his chest, letting herself have this moment of peace before the storm she knew was coming. What she didn't know was that the storm would arrive sooner than expected, and the choice she'd made would be tested in ways neither of them could prepare for. For months later, Kala stood in her doorway, watching the eastern horizon, one hand resting on the curve of her belly. The baby moved inside her, a flutter of life that still amazed her every time she felt it. Behind her, she heard Nkoa splitting wood, the rhythmic thud of the axe, a sound she'd grown to associate with safety, with home. Things had changed after that night. Not slowly, not gradually, but with the kind of brutal swiftness that forced adaptation. Garrett had returned 3 weeks after the marshal's visit, this time with papers claiming her land was in default on taxes she'd supposedly never paid. False. Papers, forged signatures, desperation dressed up as legality. But by then, Nakoa had taught her something her late husband never had: how to fight back. They'd written to the territorial office together, Kala with proof of every payment she'd ever made, Nakoa as her silent, imposing presence. The clerk had taken one look at Garrett's forgeries and laughed him out of the building. The humiliation had been public and absolute. Garrett hadn't returned since. "You were thinking too hard again," Nakoa said, appearing beside her with that unsettling quiet he never quite lost. His hand joined hers on her belly, his palm warm and steady. "I'm thinking about how different everything is. Better different or worse different." She leaned into him, feeling the solid strength of his body against her back. Better. Terrifying, but better. The pregnancy had been confirmed 6 weeks after that first night. Kala had known even before the signs became obvious, had felt the change in her body like a whispered secret. When she told Nakoa, he dropped his knees in front of her, his forehead pressed her stomach, and wept. She'd never seen a man cry like that, with relief, with gratitude, with the kind of grief that finally had somewhere to go. "I have been thinking," Nakoa said carefully, "about what happens after the child is born." Her heart clenched. This was the conversation she'd been dreading. The one where he reminded her of their agreement, that he would leave, that the child would be hers alone. "I remember what we agreed," she said quietly. "I know." He turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "And I want to change it." Hope and fear collided in her chest. "Change it how?" "I want to stay." The words came out fierce, desperate. "Not because of obligation, not because of the child, though I want to know them more than I can say. I want to stay because these 4 months have been the first time since my family died that I have wanted to wake up in the morning." Tears burned behind her eyes. "You want to stay if you will have me? Not as a guest, not as someone passing through," as he struggled with the word, "as a partner, someone who builds this life with you. What about your promise to your people to preserve what was lost? I am preserving it." His hand covered hers on her belly. "This child will know their heritage, will carry Apache blood and stories and language forward. But I realize now that preservation is not about dying alone with nothing but memory. It is about living fully enough that what you carry becomes something worth continuing." Kala's voice broke. "You scare me so badly that first night, standing there, bleeding, asking for something impossible. And now I cannot imagine this life without you in it. Then I stay, if you want me." "Yes." She laughed through tears. "Yes, you fool. I want you to stay." He kissed her then, his hands cradling her face like she was something precious. When they broke apart, both of them were crying. "Our child will have the strangest story," she said, wiping her eyes. "Our child will have a true story that is better than a simple one." The months that followed brought challenges neither of them had anticipated. Stares in town, whispers that followed Kala wherever she went. But they also brought unexpected allies. The clerk who'd exposed Garrett's fraud, a widowed farmer who traded supplies without judgment. Even the marshal, who stopped by once to ensure she was safe and left satisfied that she was exactly where she chose to be. When their daughter was born on a February morning, she came into the world screaming with impressive fury. Nakoa held her with shaking hands, tears streaming down his face as he whispered her name. "Nina, strong one, you will know where you come from. You will know who your father's people were. And you will know that you were wanted, chosen, loved before you were even born." Kala watched them. Together, her heart so full act. This wasn't the life she'd imagined. It was stranger, harder, more complicated than anything she dreamed. It was also more real. She had chosen the impossible, had said yes to a dying man's desperate request, and in doing so, had found something she'd thought was lost forever. A family, a future, a reason to be brave. Nakoa looked up at her, their daughter nestled against his chest, and smiled. It was the first real smile she'd ever seen from him, unguarded and whole. "Thank you," he said, "for seeing me when I was invisible, for choosing life when it would have been easier to choose fear." "Thank you," she replied, "for asking, for being brave enough to want something impossible." Their daughter gripped Nakoa's finger with tiny, perfect hands, and Colin knew with absolute certainty that they had created something that mattered. Not just a child, but a bridge between worlds. A living answer to the question of what survives when everything else is lost. Love survives. Choice survives. Courage survives. And sometimes that is enough. If you enjoyed this story, click the video on your screen now to watch another powerful tale from the frontier, where courage and destiny meet in unexpected ways. Don't forget to subscribe and consider leaving a super chat to support us in bringing you more stories like these. Your support means